Well, hello.
Hello, everybody.
I'm back with another bookmark.
Great. So we should probably get right to it.
Yeah, better late than never.
Right.
Yeah, we're having some, once again, some bookmark issues. It's never a bookmark without,
without some sort of technical issues.
Yeah.
We want to thank you guys for joining us today. Hello, Rockfin. Hello, our YouTube fans. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. We're really excited to be bringing our friend in from Australia. So without further ado.
Yeah, let's bring on Alex. Hello, Alex. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Alex.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, well, glad to be here. Better late than never.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for being a sport about that. That's great. We're so happy that you're here.
So what's tomorrow look like?
Yeah, well, let's just do this next bit. But yeah.
Looks like today.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I'll try and stay in today. Let's worry about today. Tomorrow will be tomorrow.
Okay. Well, you're in our tomorrow, so that's why I was wondering.
Right. Sorry. Well, what's yesterday like, really?
Yeah, right. Well,
Very confusing, you guys.
Very confusing. So yeah, go ahead.
No, we brought you on because, we're friends and we do a lot of back and forth chatting about what's going on in the world. And the latest cause du jour is the trucker convoy situation. And we know that you live in Australia, and we know that there's some shit going down in Canberra right now, right? Is that how you pronounce it? Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah, right. Yeah, Canberra.
Okay. Canberra.
Yeah. I heard you say Canberra the other day, and that works as well. I think
Canberra.
Let's just go with the nation's capital. That's
the nation's capital. Yeah.
Capital.
So tell us about the nation's capital. Where is it in the country?
Yeah. So it's sort of between Melbourne and Sydney. It's in the lower half of the country. It's sort of about maybe 2.5, 3 hour drive southwest of Sydney. If anyone knows where Sydney is, it's up in the mountains. Probably got a permanent population of about 400,000. I don't know. I haven't really looked exactly what it is, but it would be around that. It's where the federal parliament sits, and has done for well over 100 years.
Okay.
And for some reason, people have got it in their head that they need to jump in their truck or car and head up there and do something. I don't know exactly what.
I wanted to ask you real quick, just more about the city, and then we can move on from there. But is it like Washington, D.C., where it's its own sort of city-state, or is it in a... Okay, all right. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it sits inside the Australian capital, what's known as the ACT, the Australian Capital Territory. So
okay.
It has its own whole territory laws, and it has its own territory parliament that sits as well. But the federal parliament of Australia sits in there as well. So.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know, because so like Washington is District of Columbia, and it's
that's right. Yeah,
it's kind of in the between several states.
Right.
So
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good to know. So did you want to start? I mean,
yeah. So let's start from the very beginning. Okay. Let's go back to before the convoy, when there was an incident with the old Parliament House, and
there was an Aboriginal tent embassy that you mentioned.
Right.
Tell us what that is first.
Tell us about that.
And then there was...
And about the time that all that took place.
Okay. So there is an Aboriginal tent embassy that's been sitting in and occupying a place on the parliamentary grounds in Canberra for 50 years. And they've done all sorts of very visible activism and pushing forward the rights of... Look, I'll use the word Indigenous. It doesn't sit with everybody, but just for the purposes of this, we'll go with Indigenous. I think everybody understands what I'm getting at. So the Aboriginal Tent Embassy has had a real air of validity to it for the past 50 years. A little before Christmas, I suppose, another group calling itself the Original Sovereign Tribal Federation rocked up there, when I say there, at the parliamentary grounds, and started to try and form their own occupation, claiming, and there were a bunch of non-Indigenous people there as well. This is the thing. So that's really sort of the seeds of where a lot of this convoy to Canberra stuff actually starts. And you'll see in a lot of the mainstream reports that come out, people who are being arrested at the moment are being arrested in relation to events that occurred at Old Parliament House in the lead up to this. So that's kind of where the lead up to this comes, is that you've got an established group of Indigenous people who've been there for a long time, making some real, well, you know, in some ways have made a lot of progress. And there's a real air of validity around that. And then you've got this other group that have rocked up that are now trying to make some type of claim that they have a right to be there. And they've rocked up with a bunch of other non-Indigenous people who are making similar claims and attaching their own personal sovereignty to it, and then trying to stake a claim outside Old Parliament House and launch some type of action from there. And it depends how much you buy into their I don't know what you want to call it, really. Like, I call it like a mind virus sometimes. Like, what we're really getting down to is this common law fallacy that they're pushing, that they have a right to just go around and ignore every other law because the government has no jurisdiction. And so that's kind of the genesis of where all of this comes from. Some of the people who launched action at the Old Parliament House in January, and some of that action involved allegedly setting Old Parliament House on fire, the doors of it. Some of those people involved in that, just by coincidence, happened to be brothers of the people who set up the Convoy to Canberra GoFundMe. And So this is where I looked at it right from the word go. I saw Convoy to Canberra pop up on my Facebook feed. I went and did a quick search on Facebook. I looked and found this GoFundMe through a Convoy to Canberra page. I went and looked, and I don't think I sent you the screenshots, but I looked at the group when it had maybe 15,000 members, I think. So it was only sort of 24, but you could see even then it was growing really quickly. They already had maybe $20,000 in the GoFundMe kitty at that stage.
In 24 hours. Yeah,
in 24 hours.
Wow.
So I went and looked, and there wasn't a heap of stuff up in the group at that point. So you could see who the admins were, and that was one thing I didn't mention to you in the first. I looked at the admins, who the admins were, and this name Harder came up. Sam Harder came up, and just again coincidence. Ryan Harder happens to be one of the people who's involved allegedly in arson attacks at Old Parliament House, and this is what's come through mainstream. So it's not me just speculating and casting stuff around. This is what the authorities are saying. Right. So to see this convoy pop up 2 weeks later with the brother of one of these guys, so that's the start of it, right? So that's where I said
right. So just to recap, prior to the convoy in Canberra, there was an incident at Old Parliament House. Apparently, there was some sort of arson event. The person arrested was a Ryan Harder.
I think that's correct. Yeah, I might have the Ryan and the Sam around the wrong way.
But his brother,
one of the Harder brothers,
his brother Sam,
one of the Harder brothers. That's right.
Was the one who started the GoFundMe page for the Canberra convoy, right?
Yes, and certainly started the Convoy to Canberra group as well on Facebook, which by the time it got put to private settings had 180,000 members, and that was in a week and a half or 2 weeks or something like that. So it really grew really quickly.
Yeah, you got to wonder about
if you didn't see it right from the start, I can see why people would get caught up a week later and go, "Oh no, this is a thing. This is a thing."
Right.
So yeah, sorry to tail off.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Go on.
Okay, I wanted to ask about the Parliament, because there's the old Parliament and then there's another Parliament building. So there's two Parliament buildings. I'm very confused by this, because we heard about this on UK Column the other day, and the commentator didn't clear things up at all for me. Can you give me a
Look, I'll do my best without like looking
Sure.
at web pages or anything like that. But the old Parliament House, and look, they both sit very close to one another, but the new Parliament House was built in the 80s. It wasn't built because there was an illegal government suddenly installed that decided to sit there. It was built because they needed a new Parliament House. It was bigger. There was, more people to sit in there. Look, there are other reasons around why it was chosen as well, but like the straight up ostensible reason is that it was a new Parliament House. When they changed the Parliament House, they brought across all of the rules and laws and everything that they had across. It's not like they changed suddenly without anybody knowing.
It's a new government building. It's just a new building.
Governments do, and they moved across there. They brought all the laws across. Where people get confused is that in the 1970s, there was a ton of changes made to Australian law, especially around how money was created. And that's where the story is, yeah?
Okay.
It's how corporations started to be able to make money in certain areas within the federal government economic system.
Okay.
And that's, and partly this is why they got rid of the Whitlam government back in the 70s. And, there's lots of reasons why we can look at it and go, yeah, they're very real political reasons that we can describe through the political lens without having to jump into these crazy aliens, Freemasons, which may well be true, but none of that is the reason why these people organize.
Okay.
These people do this stuff. So let's get down to why they do it.
Yeah, and who they are, because you used a term OPCA, and I looked that up, and it was linked to something called Freemen on the Land.
That's it. There we go.
Where you see them in a lot of the Commonwealth countries, including Canada,
right,
and Australia. So there's a connection there. But let's talk about OPCA and what that means, what that's all about. I'm sorry.
And again, like I'm no expert on anything. I'm just a guy that's looking up stuff on the internet. And I've watched so OPCA, it's the Organised Pseudo-Legal Commercial Argument. If you look it up, as you said, you can find that it's pretty prevalent in Commonwealth countries. I've got some theories around why that is, but what it really purports to do is give an individual the right to say that they're a free man on the land, no matter where they are. And it's got different iterations, but essentially, you're really talking about the right to rebellion is what people really want to tie around this, and that's where you get the Magna Carta.
Right.
Okay. I noticed that. Yeah.
Lawful rebellion, that sort of stuff. So that's really heavy in it. Another thing that's really heavy in it is in the OPCA is the governing body is deemed to be a corporation. Right. So what they're saying here in Australia is that Australia is a corporation, and evidence of that is that they changed the laws in the 1970s, and all of the seals, the parliamentary seals that were once royal, like had royal stuff on them with unicorns and bloody lions and badges, all of that signage was changed over to a Commonwealth sign, which now has, an emu and a kangaroo on it. And that is the evidence, they say, that Australia is now a corporation, right? So this is what they actually believe.
Yeah.
And because of that, they had to build a new Parliament House. Right?
I see.
So the solution to this is obviously to go to the old Parliament House and just act like you can run Parliament there, and all of the bad guys will get what's coming to them.
I see. Well, the guy Alex
Alex Thompson from UK Column.
Right. He was talking about that, and he was also saying, and they also say something about the Queen of Australia in the you know, in this changeover, and these people are complaining about that you know, that's evidence also that there's no, you know, real government, the old government, you know. Yeah.
Which, you know, again, it's nonsense. It really is nonsense. And if you want to believe that stuff, then like, here's my take on it. It's pretty well established. There's a number of, I think I've even sent you through some cases where people try this, maybe not specifically the OPCA, but they get caught up and they try these quasi-legal, is what I call them a lot, quasi-legal solutions that aren't actually solutions. And, you know, they get up, and social media is really bad for it, because they get a platform and they get a chance to get up and say, yeah, this is going to work, this is going to work. But what you don't hear is they take it to court and they lose every time. Every single time they lose. And they'll come out and they'll say that they were silenced and that they didn't get their chance, but that's not the case. You know, the entire legal system is aware of what the OPCA is, and that's, you know, that's where we get into what I've said to you guys, which is, I think this whole thing has actually been deliberately put in there so that people can get confused and not actually see what the real problem driving all of this is, which is class. Yeah. Like, so they go away and want to fight about freedom, and they're taking off to Canberra and using all these false legal arguments, which are not going to work.
Right.
And from a military perspective, they can control that really, really easily.
Of course.
Well, sorry, easily. They can control that. It's not easy, but they have the structure to do that. So anyway, I'm sorry, I've tailed off again.
Oh, no. I just want to interject really quickly. Earlier today, I did JP and I together did like a 10-minute audio, which is sometimes what we do on our community page on Facebook. And I talked about how, you know, the United States and Australia and Canada were basically corporations. And what I meant is that corporations have absorbed our legislative bodies, so we no longer are operating under, you know, the constitutional protections. So I can see how these OPCA weirdos can conflate this very real issue that we're all facing right now, which is that corporations, you know, they've absorbed our local school districts. We have unelected committee members now.
And so what you're talking about, Julie, is being able to add the context to what that actually means. So if someone says Australia is a corporation, and then like, I'll listen to that, and if they can break it down in the way that you're breaking it down, that is correct, but they're not breaking it down that way. That's the difference.
They're going off somewhere else. And so unfortunately, because we live in a capitalist society and we do have, you know, this corporate merging with government, which is basically fascism.
There we go.
You have to think like a corporate entity yourself. So I'm concerned about people that are, you know, waving flags and saying human rights violations here and there. Corporations don't care about human rights. They only care about their bottom line. So if you go, like in the United States, there are legal documents that have been filed with the courts to say these corporations are at fault for defrauding individuals because of consumer rights protections or because of
health and safety
or laws that are already in place, even within the corporate structure. Like, for instance, you cannot be monopolizing a certain product. There's a product that's come out of Australia. It's called the
Canada.
I'm sorry, Canada.
Liquid nanoparticles.
Lipid nanoparticles, which is what makes the mRNA vaccine. So Canada has got basically the patent or the monopoly,
holds the rights on those
all of the vaccines in the entire world. And so from a corporate perspective, you can't, you know, there's certain laws in place. You can't monopolize the market that way. You have to share, with the market,
Well, you can't
the product.
You can't both have the product and then manipulate the competition
Right.
as well. So they have both sides of it.
No,
right?
I'm not a corporate lawyer. I don't,
Right.
but I do
No,
know.
no, no. You're 100% right. Yep.
I know basic business structure, and it's like you can't have Starbucks, for instance, monopolizing the world. There's laws for that. So you need to mix it up a bit, and everybody needs a piece of the pie when it comes to business as usual. And so if people would look at it more from that perspective and realize that there is that underlying issue going on in Canada, we might be able to have a more intelligent conversation about this.
Yeah.
And that's where,
this is the thing as well. I'm not commenting directly at what's going on in Canada. I try where possible to just comment on what's going on in Canberra and in Australia where I live.
Sure.
It's just that, and we've had some chats about this. There's a lot of similarities as well. So, and there's reasons behind those similarities, and they're directly linked to what you've just spoken about.
Right. Well, I think another similarity, and it seems like these the OPCA people that you're talking about, they seem very reactionary and very much on the right wing of politics.
That's fair. Yep.
Yeah, and it feels like that's the same thing going on in the Canadian truck driving convoy. That it's dominated more on the right, which allows for this narrative to come into play that right-wing conservatives or even like radicals now are taking over, and I've used the term Pied Piper, that they're bringing in people who are somewhat like-minded, but they are just dying to take action and take back their life and just feel like they're part of something, and they're using that in a cynical way to bring people in. But now everybody gets painted with a broad brush by the media that they're all right-wing crazies, lunatics, and like white supremacists and things like that. And I feel like that's what's behind a lot of this.
Absolutely. I can't agree more with that. I got nothing to add, really.
So let's just put it out in the open, just for our audience, just for clarity. Are you against the vaccine mandates in general?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The simple answer to that is yes. I don't think health should be mandated. It's a simple answer. Now, I think I said to you in the chat, that doesn't automatically mean that I support every action against mandates, but I am against mandates. I can see the damage that they've caused. I can see they're used purely as a coercive tool, and where there's coercion involved, then that's it. People have a right to be able to choose, and they have a right to do it without coercive means being pushed on them. So I'm against them.
Okay, good. So I'm glad we cleared that up. So there's no question of that. No full false equivalences will be going on. So let's move forward a little bit into the chronology of this. What was the first, and we'll see if we can capture any of this. What was the first thing that gave you pause for thought regarding the Canberra, protest and the movement?
Yeah. So it was really seeing that that name harder. As soon as I saw it on the admin list, and as soon as I looked at the GoFundMe, and that was only sort of 24 hours in,
right?
I knew the link straight away. So pretty much 24 hours from its inception.
Right. Okay. So what did you want to show? Let's see. Really quickly, I'm going to read something that you sent me while we look for maybe a link, and you can describe to us what's going on in this link. You said, so I asked you, what were some of the signals that made you realize that this wasn't what it claimed? And you said, obviously, the GoFundMe organizers are OPCA adherents. The numbers that they're reporting are preposterous. Can you go into that? What do you mean by that? The numbers are preposterous.
So we've got a situation. Look, I'll use today, for example. They're saying that there's 1.4 million people in Canberra.
Okay.
Right? Right now, that's what people are actually reporting. 1.4 million people in Canberra. Now, that's where we're at now. The numbers they were using right at the start were preposterous as well. They were trying to get 1 million people to Canberra, and they were saying that they were going to have 50,000 trucks on the road, and that they were going to get 50,000 trucks. And within days, it was obvious that they weren't
push.
on the road.
Okay.
So, you know, they're saying that they had 100,000 people at this march yesterday, and this is a good one to put up. I just don't see it. Like, there's lots of people there. I'm not disputing that in any way at all. But I think you might be looking at maybe, look, I said 10,000. I'll double it. I'll say there might be 20,000 when you get them all up on the lawns and round it into one area. But I think if you sit and have a good look at the actual numbers that come through here, there's not 100,000 people there. And if you've ever been, and I have been in some big crowds, like I used to go to the Australian Football League in Melbourne quite regularly at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, which holds big crowds, 100,000 quite regularly. I've been to dozens of 100,000 crowds where they are well organised, and like, you know what 100,000 people sounds like.
Right. We know what 1 million people are like in one little place. We used to go to a festival
in San Francisco where 1 million people would batter the grounds of a small park. 1 million people.
They don't look like a single line of people trailing off
on a road. Like, come on.
Yeah, on a road. You've got people waving hands. You've got flags there. So
right.
You've got optics. Like, people just aren't seeing what they think they're seeing.
Right.
And so it's very creatively shot from certain angles. You go and have a look at the camping grounds that they say, look at this. Well, yeah, have a good look at it. I reckon there might be 5,000 vehicles there. Big deal. You know?
I actually saw a video of the campgrounds, and it was sparse. It was pretty empty. Okay, so the next thing that really struck me was when you said that there was no clear action defined. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, well, if you go and have a look at what I don't even know if the GoFundMe is still visible or not, but the GoFundMe that they originally set up, like, what was their original goal? Like, it's not clearly defined even, and in the group description that they put up, it was to go to Canberra and fight the mandates. That was it. Like, how? All right, so there has been, and they actually said, don't worry about the lack of clarity. We'll provide more information as we go along.
Oh,
like this was constant messaging that came through in the first year.
Yeah. Okay, so, you know, not that I'm advocating for GoFundMe and their pulling of funding or whatever, but you have to have, like, in order to have a legitimate crowdsourcing or crowdfunding platform or
I can't remember what the wording was. They did have something there,
but it wasn't very clearly defined. Like with dates, like, we want this to start on this date, and we want
there's none of that.
Nothing like that. Nothing really truly organized. So it feels very disorganized to me. So the mandates that they want to fight are state government power, not federal, except in very specific circumstances. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. This and this is where. So there's a lot of people caught up with this, and yeah, you want to fight it, okay? I'm not saying don't fight this.
Of course, yeah.
The way the Australian, I'm trying to choose the words right here. The way the Australian Constitution is structured is that when they incorporated a lot of the states to put them under the federal Constitution, they didn't just say, right, the states have no power anymore. What they said is that the states will retain some power in some area, and the federal government will assume some responsibility in some area. One of those areas is public health.
Okay.
So if you're going to fight a public health mandate, then in the provision of the services for that, so, you know, who shoots it, who does the actual nuts and bolts physical of it, that's at a state level.
Mm-hmm.
The money creation for it, that's done at a federal level. There's no worries about that.
Okay.
But the actual powers of who decides to write the legislation around that stuff sits at a state level in the state parliament. So it's covered under the federal constitution, but they say, yeah, the states do it. That's how it's covered federally. So there's no point. And our prime minister, not that I think you should really like listen to everything prime ministers say, but they don't come out and make deliberately false statements. They're always vague and imprecise.
Of course.
Because Scott Morrison stood in front of cameras yesterday and pretty much repeated exactly what I said, which is the federal government can't do anything here except in the very specific circumstances where it has federal delegation over federal employees. Right. So some of the people going to Canberra, yeah, it will apply to them, but only those who are covered under those very specific federal circumstances. Everybody else who wants to fight it should be doing it at their state parliament. So that's what I mean by that.
Okay. Just to elaborate on that a little bit from our position in the United States where we are, it doesn't matter if the current figurehead in chief, we'll call him Biden, Joe Biden, it doesn't matter if he makes an announcement saying, I declare that, all COVID policy is reversed and terminated, no vaccine mandates, no masking, no blah, 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 everybody back to normal. It doesn't matter if he says that because it's going to be up to your smaller bodies of government within your local jurisdictions and your local municipalities.
Yeah, and it's exactly the same here. The names around those bodies, they vary from here to there. There's it's essentially the same structure that we're talking about. So yeah, it's the same. There's no point going to Joe Biden and yelling at him to lift the mandates in the states because the states do what they want in that regard.
Right. Well, and even when the state governments here, like our Pennsylvania government, lifted the mask mandates last summer, your winter. The school districts continued the same policy.
Continue to torture the children.
Right. And now there were a lot of companies that continued that, but they eventually, stopped. And what they do instead is they say, we strongly encourage you to wear a mask, and nobody does,
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So the last point that I want to make, or that, that you mentioned to me, was that the ASIO and the AFP are both conducting domestic terrorist operations, which have unfathomable powers to identify and disrupt, including creating fake rebellion movements, i.e. color revolutions. Yeah. So that right there, I think if I'm feeling you correctly, Alex, I believe that this is the crux of your concern about all of these movements. Right, all of these convoys.
Exactly right. That's and I think the evidence is out there if people want to look into it. I use the AFP and I hate using anagrams, but you slip into it. So what we're really talking about is the Australian Signals Directorate.
Right, of course.
So this is why I keep on banging on, and you guys are big on picking up signals as well, and and credit to you guys. I probably wouldn't have looked that closely at signalling and at the connection with the Australian Signals Directorate if you hadn't kept on putting that language out there. So I've been running around using spies and espionage and blah, blah, and that it's all correct. But when I put it straight underneath the Australian Signals Directorate, it all makes sense because these guys get funded. Off the top of my head, I think it was a $45 billion budget for this year, which breaks down to $112 million a day.
Oh my God.
So tell me that
it's still not enough.
Being directed towards the control of potential dissidents. It has to be, and it is.
Right.
And they even name the operations, and I can't off the top of my head think of what there are, but there's currently 4 or 5 separate overtly known operations that are running to capture people involved in domestic terrorist activities, and they provide some fairly clear language around who they think those people are, and that's really what I'm pointing out here. People can go, oh, they're always going to call us terrorists. I've been around activism for almost a decade, and the government will call you a terrorist, but there's there's knowing it, and then there's walking straight into it, like a very cleverly designed trap. And that's what it is, a very cleverly designed trap.
Yeah.
It feels like it.
And that's what we felt like with the Canadian truck convoy.
From the beginning.
Right from the very beginning.
I was like,
we both got a hinky feeling when we heard about it, because it just
really.
didn't feel right.
What I'd like
the mentality stuff I've seen on Canada.
Oh, God.
I hate it.
I hate it too, Alex. No, believe me. I mean, a couple of weeks ago when we did our bookmark, our podcast, like we're doing with you today, we said that military operatives were torturing ISIS detainees, or people that they would label as ISIS detainees, with recordings of crying over and over again to break them psychologically. So you're seeing all this crying on social media, all this weeping with joy and relief. Yeah. And all I could think was, these people are being psychologically tormented and tortured. Yeah. But I do want to stress that, it's really unfortunate that really good people, hardworking Canadians, hardworking Australians who are looking to find a better way than have to live under, oppressive health measures that have got, they've been swept up in this because
it's been 2 years
so
of absolute extreme psychological torture on. Right. Well, I don't know about you guys, but it sounds like you're describing the same thing as happening to us over here. But it is extreme psychological, and it's torture. You're right. Yeah. People don't see it that way because it just comes through and like it all looks normal, but it's far from normal. So when I'm speaking out about this stuff, and I've spoken out about it since 2020 and before, I'm not doing it to try and shit on people's dreams or make them feel bad or any of that. In fact, it's the opposite. And this stuff is going to fail. And when people come away brokenhearted from this, they're going to want answers. And if anything, that's probably what I'm trying to put out there, is just a consistent, this is why it's happening. This is why I think it's happening. This is what you can go and look up for yourself and make up your own mind about it, really. Because to me, I've been watching it now and when I say it, I've been watching how the government uses ASIO to basically tell us what they're going to be doing.
Right.
In this case here, they've broadcast, back in 2020, they've broadcast that domestic terrorism was going to be their number one priority. White nationalist groups, I'm using their language here, white nationalists, it's not necessarily incorrect either, white nationalist groups are hanging around the edges like they always do, wanting to recruit into their violent movements. That's the sort of language that ASIO has been putting out there. And guess what? It's right, because all of those people are out there, and unfortunately, they tend to be the leaders of the movement. Mm-hmm. Just by coincidence, every one of these figureheads ends up being linked to, in some way, to one of these. Again, this is the language that's coming out of the Signals Directorate, but one of these extreme groups that are willing to commit violence.
Yeah.
And again, this is the type of language that's coming out of ASIO, that these people don't want to listen to reasonable measures put before them by law authorities, that they're involving children in their actions. And I look at Canberra and I see that there's kids there, and I see that there's acoustic weapons being used, and I see that there's reports of unsanitary conditions. And I go, you guys are just you're being set up on so many different levels here, and you just don't see it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. No, I've been doing a lot of talking.
Well, I was just thinking to myself when you were talking about, using the fact that you're using their language. It's like these white supremacists who set up outside and recruit. It's almost as if you're describing the job description that they created.
Yeah, and they do that. And I've said this, they advertise positions and people show up and they fill the positions and now they're acting in those roles.
Right.
And,
Right.
like in 20 years' time, we'll look back on this if we're, still able to remember it. And what we're saying now will play out just the way every other bloody spy and espionage story has ever played out before. And the real story behind all of those is always about protecting the old structures that have always been there.
Of course.
Right.
What's going on here?
Right. And, and then you get the language of like safety and security and, which is, what Nazis used, but along the same lines.
And they corporatize that language now so they can make money out of it as well.
Thank you. Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly.
that's what it is.
And you see that same language in corporations as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Not only in their advertising and their marketing campaigns, but also within their own structures, within their own people. But, something that I wanted to point out as well is, you were talking about how, they're focusing on, white supremacy and all these fringe groups and things. And it's like, I've been seeing this for at least the last 15 years coming out of like the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Mm-hmm.
Like interviews on National Public Radio on Fresh Air, with the host and talking about these right-wing, extreme right-wing militias and white supremacist militias in the United States and how they're going to take over. And it's like 15 years later, I've yet to see this happen. But see, it's this idea of like floating this idea out there, floating a term, floating these concepts out there to get them in the public mindscape.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, and it's interesting you said the Southern Poverty Law Center. I've seen that. I've seen them more in the past 12 months than I've seen a lot of other websites because they distribute a lot of propaganda, really. But once you recognise what it is, you can use that information. And I suppose that's the other message that I want to get through to people is that just because there's a lot of propaganda out there doesn't mean you can't use it. Like once you understand what the signals are and you can start to decode what they might be saying and who they're pitched, like you say, the corporate stuff, once you can work out who they're pitching it at and what the bigger message is, you can use all of any crappy source basically. And that's what I'm saying with this stuff on Canberra. Don't believe me. Don't believe the mainstream. Have a look at what the people who are reporting the stuff from Canberra are saying and make up your mind based on that. Just put it up against what the Signals Directorate are saying about how they classify terrorism. I suppose that's the mark but the real point I want to make.
Yeah.
Let me bring up a screen real quick.
We want to bring up a live Facebook feed. Do we want to bring up this guy right here?
Yeah, but before I do that, I want to just bring this page up because you sent this to us. This is the director that you were talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, Mike Burgess.
This is the mainstream article that is, believe it or not, kind of helpful. It has a list of the who's who in the movement. And we'll include the link to this, when we're done here. But
the language here, it's like Mike Burgess, who says ASO, as you called it, says we need to reflect on why some teenagers are hanging Nazi flags and portraits of the Christchurch killer on their bedroom walls. Come on.
Oh my God. That language is so outrageous. It show, what it really signals to me when I hear this really outrageous language is that they're going to be targeting teenagers and younger people. What do you think?
And we are already seeing evidence of that as well. And I'm not going to be able to give you any links of that because you're just not going to see a child being abused by law authorities or anything like that. But the bigger picture stuff is that there is an attack on children in all of this as well. So I'm just trying to think of how I might draw that in what he said here.
Right.
Yeah. And
like, I suppose broadly speaking, you can look at for example, the Canberra protest. There are kids there.
Yes.
So,
yes.
In a real sense, we've already got structures in place where, let me give you an example. If someone wants to report one of the parents there for having their children in an unsafe environment, there is already a government authority and a process in place to investigate that.
Exactly.
So that's kind of, I think, what I take out of that. Are they going to, directly attack children with batons and things like that? I don't think that's going to occur.
No, that's not going to happen. It's going to be something much more. What's going to happen is somebody will report it. You'll probably get a letter or a phone call that says you need to come to the social services office, discuss, this event that was reported on with you. And you're going to have to go into counseling, and we've got a third sector organization that will profit from this counseling, and you need to go to it, or we might take your child away. And so you're going to do everything in the world, thus, to hold on to your child, thus feeding into the systems that have been fabricated.
You can see now why a nice caring guy like Mike Burgess would want to try and make sure that system, like that sort of situation, is mitigated. So, like it just plays perfectly into what they're trying to stop. And like I said, my argument is that they actually provoke this deliberately so that they can control the response to it.
Wow.
Right.
Well, Julie was talking about a guy that you sent us a video to. It's this dude here, Peter Little, and known by other names as well. But we have a little video I think we can show on of him, just a little bit.
Just a little video.
He starts talking to this other guy, and I want to find out who this guy is too. So let's bring up that video. Hang on just a second.
See if I can spot them both.
Okay.
Yeah, bear with us because we have a lot of tabs open.
Yeah.
So it's probably, you're just gonna have to go through and
it might be this one. Yeah, this is it.
There
it
is.
Bingo.
Whoa, lucky.
Yeah.
First try.
All right. I got to go over there and play it. Let's see. There we go.
Do that?
Yeah.
Fully transition of power, the seat of government, House and Parliament. Right this second, we're going to come right in under the banner of Mr. Solidarity. Tell them who you are and what you represent and the beautiful meal we've just had.
I'm sorry, I lost my voice, but my name is Leszek Kuntz, and I represent Solidarity Movement of Australia. We are all about, unite about all of us together, and we win this war.
Bring up the Solidarity Wikipedia page.
I don't have it.
Well, just
there we go. Get the T-shirt in.
We did destroy the communism in Eastern Europe, but we did.
What year was that?
It was in '89, but we destroyed it because we united. We had 30% of the population, 10 million people joined the forces.
Wow.
And it was 35 million people in Poland at the time.
Shout out to David Russell.
10 million people joined the forces and we just destroyed the communism. But they make one mistake. They sit around the round table and they make the deals with the criminals.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
We're going to come back to you now.
I don't think I sent you that one, did I? No.
You did. You sent us this one.
I sent you that one. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So let's break this down a little bit. Can we bring?
Let's.
Bring on
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me. I got too many things. There we go. All right. Okay. There we are.
So the Solidarity movement was the Polish. You want to bring up the Wikipedia page so I know what the hell I'm talking about?
Yeah. Took place in 1989.
It took place in 1989, and I do believe he's talking about the Polish trade union movement. Oh yeah, look at the T-shirt; it's the same. Right. You see that? So this was JP and I were talking about this. This was like a very liberals loved this. Ronald Reagan loved this.
Yeah, so the conservatives and the liberals loved it.
Yeah.
Do
you know anything about this?
Truth be told, this one here, I actually haven't looked into this Solidarity link at all. And now that you've brought it up, I've got a lot of things that I want to say about that as well. But this doesn't it just sound like another sort of color revolution type deal?
Thank you. Because
and you said Reagan supports it.
Mm-hmm.
I heard something the other day in an archive I was listening to, and this was back in the 90s. They said the line between the CIA and the Republican Party is basically indistinguishable anymore. So, and that was back in the 90s, after Reagan had just got, so that just fits so well with the Heritage Foundation's involvement in all of this, both overtly and covertly. Like we know that they go in and they do these destabilization operations in areas where they want to control the government. Really, they're controlling resources and the right to trade is what they want to do at the end.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's funny because I never thought, I was living in San Francisco at the time. I really didn't think about it much. I thought, along the lines of everybody, like, oh, how cool is that? They were able to, and this took place at the same time as the Berlin Wall coming down.
right.
Or around the same time. So, the late Reagan era, pre-George H.W. Bush. So, Daddy Bush was involved with the CIA. He might have even been a director of the CIA at one point. So that's why the Republican Party and the CIA were so hand in hand, because the president of the United States was a former CIA director, right? So they're very involved, at least. And but when I saw the Solidarity T-shirt on that guy, I was like, oh my God, I wonder if this was a proto color revolution that took place there, because it was anti-communist, but it was really convoluted. I never quite understood how a labor union could bring down a government.
Yeah, right. I haven't really looked into that at all. But that's just I know I said go to 111 and look at him describe the plan. I think was the comment I put in that video, and I didn't look any more into it because I was really just looking at the Peter Little guy. But that link with the Pole, I think it was Poland, you said, and the
same T-shirt. He was wearing
the same logo.
Same logo. Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not just. There are other. How do I put this? The anti-communist link to counter-revolutionary movements. If anybody really wants to spend just a bit of time looking into it, you'll see that anti-communists are not people you don't want to organize with them. They're not your friends.
No.
Anti-communists really are deeply conservative for the most part. They don't want things to change.
Right.
Not the bigger structure anyway. They might not like how things are right then and there. So, these are some reasons why am I a communist? No, I'm not a communist. I'm not a Marxist, but I can also look at people who are violently anti-communist.
Right.
That's what we see in these movements. Every time you pick off just a couple of layers.
Just a few, I know.
Well, and at the same time, we had a pope in the Catholic Church who was Polish and vehemently anti-communist.
Right.
But then the other thing that caught my attention, and you brought it up, was that these people were starting these OPCA folks were starting to call themselves Velvet Revolution. Julie asked me about it this morning. We just woke up and she's like, the phrase Velvet Revolution is trending, and do you know anything about that? I'm like, what? That's Czechoslovakia,
right?
Back,
there we go. So when we said, I said,
so that is also kind of a proto
around here. This is what I was getting to.
Yeah.
I did a post. Geez, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago now, because that was when I first sort of looked. It's not the first time I've seen it, but it blew back up, the Velvet Revolution. I did a post saying Velvet Revolution's a counter-revolutionary for exactly that reason, because I went and looked into, well, one, what this one was, and two, what the history of Velvet Revolutions were, and I found exactly what you just said, Julie, that there's destabilization of socialist governments.
Right.
Always around these and socialist, democratically elected, let's just say loosely, the governments that people have some say in.
Right.
These color revolutions always seem to be involved historically,
right.
And here we are with another one. This one here, Lynn Bennett's. I showed you a couple of people who've already gone and faced proceedings around this similar sort of behaviour. So this is what I'm getting at. It's not even me speculating around what will happen if they engage in this behaviour. Other people have done it within the past 12 months, and they've been taken down. And that's what will happen with the people involved in the revolution as well, in this velvet revolution. So if anybody's anywhere near them, get the hell away from them. It's simple.
Right.
So
Lynn
this Lynn Bennett, she's also in that video. I mean,
she's in the same video.
Yeah, at the start of that one with Peter Little,
Right.
Yeah.
And she was talking about, how they're, like I didn't understand half of what she was talking about because it was just their own rhetoric that they were repeating.
Yeah, they were speaking jargon,
and they're talking about like, deputizing sheriffs and doing all this stuff and like, basically, like you said, creating their own laws or doing basically, what they want. And, and this is not, this isn't like, anarchists, taking some sort of action. These are people who are like, we're creating our own government. And
they're doing this whole, and this is the thing, they mimic these ideas like parallel structures, which is great, but you can't just pretend that the other structure is not still there if you're going to create a parallel structure.
Right.
But, anyway, that's just a simple example. And it's really dangerous. People get caught up and like they believe this stuff. And after 2 years of, again, extreme psychological torture,
right,
I understand why people want something to believe in. I really get it, which is why it's even more insidious.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Very quickly, there was a disturbing video that came out of Canberra of the police knocking an older woman down or something. I was shocked. And I look at things with a critical eye. Is it this one? I believe it's this one.
So let me
let's play it, and then maybe you can help us understand what's going on with the police with this. Are they just there to be bullies? I know that in general the police are there to protect property. They don't necessarily care about people. They only care about property. Recently, we had some issue with our property being, we were defrauded of our property, and I can't tell you how fast the police showed up. But if I was lying on the floor bleeding, it would have taken hours for them to show up.
Right. Well, so here's this video.
When is he now? Oh my God! She pushed him to the ground. Oh! She came to get her car. Man! And the policeman pushed his mother in front of their children. Come here. You get your mom. Come here. She went to get her car. They're about to tow.
Anyway.
So this morning, my car was.
We quieted our mic so it wouldn't echo. She's about to tell us what actually happened to her.
All right. Well, before she does, I'll give you my read on what's going on here. So,
okay.
And again, I don't know anything, but I'm basing this on what I've seen in Victoria, because Victoria went through a lot of the protests that are taking place in Canberra right now. We saw in Victoria 12, 18 months ago. And I'm mentioning that because the response from the government is really what I'm looking at here. So the first thing straight off, like there's no excuse for pushing anybody with that level of violence, none whatsoever. So when you first see that, it looks absolutely horrible. There's a lot of context that they're not putting around. Look, and the other thing I'd say, have a close look at what she tripped on as well, because she did trip on someone's foot on the way through. Not to excuse the violence of the action that was taken by the person who pushed her, but there was a bit of that going on in what I saw there as well. That's not to justify what he did. He shouldn't have put his hands on her and pushed her off. Now, I say that because there have been, and there was last week, a Victorian police officer who has been charged for excessive use of force. So the police bodies do look at those sort of things. I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying that they do look at those sorts of things. And if there is something in that particular incident, I'm sure that it's going to be investigated. Now, all of that aside, the woman is there trying to stop her car from being put onto a tow truck. That didn't just happen. Like, she was given plenty of warning that this was going to come. She was given at least 48 hours warning that she needed to leave the car, and she refused to do it. So that's why a tow truck was there removing her car. The reason that she doesn't want to remove her car, I'd imagine, without looking too much into it, is that she probably thinks the government has no jurisdiction to do so. So you see where we're at?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So that's what I would say is the context that hasn't been given here at all, is that she's been given reasonable direction. Whether she agrees with the direction's another thing altogether. The government authority will have given her a reasonable direction to move on, and she will have chosen to ignore that direction. So it's now gotten to the point where they've said, sorry, we're just going to tow your car. And she said, well, no, you're not going to tow my car. They're actually authorized to do that. I don't agree with it, but that is how the law is played out right there.
Okay.
So that's the context I think is missing. So I'll be interested to see how she explains.
Well, she basically says, well, they were going to tow my car, and I showed up in a rental car, and here, I can play it.
Yeah, we can play it. I mean, she has all of the right excuses.
Let me see here. Yeah, play it.
Okay. Getting towed, so I ran to the car to tell them that it was my car and I would move it. I have my 3 children with me, and as I got to the car, I touched the car to say, this is my car, and next thing all I felt was 2 large hands on my back, and it wasn't just a push, it was with full force. He pushed me to the ground. I face planted. My children seen it all. My little boy was yelling out, don't touch my mum, don't touch my mum. And then my daughter was pushed by the same police officer, not with such force, but just to push her out of the way.
Yeah, and like, I don't know whether you see the same thing I see, but I see someone who's telling a completely different story. I'm not saying she's lying. It's just different. I don't know whether you can hear me. Have you got the mute back?
Oh, we
Sorry.
had to mute our mic when we play videos like that, because otherwise they sound echoey to the listeners. Yeah, and I forgot to do that earlier. But here's something.
Not to justify the actions that were taken against her, but even in her story, like 2 men, no, they didn't. 1 bloke pushed her. It wasn't 2 blokes that pushed her.
Yeah.
And you were given whether you agree with it or not, you were given a reasonable direction to move your car, and you didn't do it. So, and you were sitting on the bonnet. You didn't just stand at the bonnet. You sat on the bonnet and tried to stop him from putting the car in.
Right.
So,
well, here's the other thing too. It's the video starts out with somebody that we saw in another video in this like van, like big like RV. And she looks out the window at the camera person and says, she got attacked by the police. She needs help. Go help her. And she's like bugging out. She's like driving away as fast as she can, because all those people were facing the same situation. They had a lot of flatbed trucs ready to start towing cars away, and those people got out of there as soon as they possibly could without getting.
And you don't hear any of that reported, other than you might see a mention in a mainstream report saying 75 people were moved on. You don't get or you do see 15 protesters were arrested. That's the sort of stuff that they're arrested in relation to. It's because they don't move on when they're given a direction. And they go, oh, we're not allowed to protest. We're not allowed. Well, yeah, okay, there's all of that as well. But if you're going to, you've got to be aware of the situation you're in, I suppose, is really what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I think, to the point that you made earlier about, or we've been talking about, these people are getting brought in, or they're attracted to these movements or these events, these protests. And they're people who have no experience with protests at all. And they're doing things like what you just said, thinking that they can do it because they're protesting, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's their first taste. And I'm not saying I'm a bloody seasoned protester or anything like that. I actually don't get around going to protest. I've got my own reasons around that. But having said that, I have been around activism for almost a decade, and the stuff that these people are involved in, it's the first time that they've really had a big social issue press on them like this. So, this is the first time. I don't know about you guys, but when you get involved in societal issues, let's cause them that. It's not, you don't stick on one. You know, you might start on, like I first got into this because I didn't like the way the environment was being looked after.
Right.
And like, look at where I'm at now. You know, I'm commenting on bloody espionage. And I guess what I'm saying is that the more you get into it, the more that you start to cross over all of these different issues. And then when you get someone who just walks in the door and says, oh, here's the answer, it's like, dude, seriously, you're throwing like fallacious material around that we know is wrong. So why? And, you know, people buy it. People buy it at the moment because they're scared, and because they don't understand the bigger picture.
Well, and I think that there's also that sort of patriotism that's going on. You know, we've been seeing it in Canada, especially, you know, and hearing about like somebody standing out and watching the 40-mile convoy go by and standing out in the cold for like 3 hours. Or, you know, the whole, you know, cliche of like, oh, we gave out sandwiches to the drivers and we did this and we did, you know, and it's like they want to feel like they're part of something. And it's probably the first time that they've ever felt like they could invest themselves into this. And my heart goes out to those people.
It smells exactly like, to me, it smells exactly like the people who jumped on and done the COVID thing and said, get on board, do your vaccination, do your part of society. If you don't get on board, then you're the problem. Well, I don't see this as any different whatsoever.
I don't either.
Right.
I really don't.
I don't either.
I don't either. And the criticism that's been coming at us for saying the things we are saying about these convoys is along the same lines as the same criticism we got for not going along with COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of remarkable that the actual things that have been said parallel the same phrases. You know, they're not the exact same words, but they are the same sentiment.
Yeah.
They are.
And that's, you know, it's because, and we know this, it's because it's the same people controlling the same signals. and that's why it's the same. It really, like we say, it's a class war, and it's a psychological war being played.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
What is your biggest concern right now? And let me just, you know, ask you that question with this, so that you can filter it through this information. Right now, Canada is under a state of emergency because of the convoy protests. So what is your biggest concern in Australia?
They'll do the same here, I think they'll go with a state of emergency in Canberra. I mean, there's still a lot of people. I'm arguing with people over the numbers again. I think it's actually in the powers that be benefit to do a state of emergency. So because then they can roll things out faster and more efficiently when they enact those powers. But either way, it doesn't matter to them. Like, they can grind it out and still do the same thing. They could. So what am I really worried about? I'm worried about the people who were really critical about this whole I'm just looking for the right word, you know, the whole way that this new bioeconomy here in Victoria has been rolled out. The people who are critical of that, I'm worried that they're going to get caught up in this whole new thing and lose all sense of like critical thinking and therefore ability to connect to a real community. They're going to get caught up in this pseudo digital prison that everybody else is running around trying to fix and change. And, you know, my view is we can't get away from that. So we need to start like connecting with what's real within that, while working out how to get rid of the bloody thing.
Right.
So, you know, what am I worried about? I'm worried about the good people who have for 2 years, and, you know, even those who've jumped on along the way, who've really challenged what's been going on, getting suckered in by this.
Yeah.
And us losing them, I guess, you know. And when I say us, I mean those who remain critical of what the hell's going on.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. There's already people that, who are, and you've seen it, you've seen the complaints against us, you've seen the attacks on our platform and against me and JP personally, because we didn't smoke the hopium,
Oh yeah,
right away.
We two are just bloody rabble-rousing shitbags that don't actually do anything. Didn't you know that? All you do is create division. And I see this over and over and over again, and you guys do too. Whenever you start asking questions, critical questions,
right?
Oh, you're just causing division. Oh, you're just this. Oh, you're just that. Well, what are you doing? There's it.
Right.
What are you doing?
Well,
the other thing too, I think, and you liked the comment I made when we were in our conversation is it's like what's happening now is what's been happening to the left since at least the 60s.
Yeah.
Since the new left that took out, that came out in the 60s, and all the division that goes on. I mean, there's natural divisions that go on anyway. I mean, all the Marxists, were all fighting amongst themselves anyway. But and then the anarchists and the Marxists were fighting against each other. But you had the Maoists coming in and trying to overtake every. So that shit was going on anyway. But then if you've got another organization like I don't know, like the CIA or something, coming in and also bringing in people to divide those splinters into even more splinters. It's
identity politics on speed. It's just crazy.
It really is.
And that's where you look at the involvement of the intelligence operations, like not just on the ground, but through academia. And I think that's kind of what you're referring to.
Sure.
Back to the 60s and the 70s. Like there was an attack definitely through.
Oh yeah.
Through academia on, and I only know this because I go back and I try and read the stuff from the 90s and the 80s, and you just can't make any sense of it because it's all postmodernist garbage.
Yeah. Well, I was looking up a historian that we used as a source, as a voice source on one of our videos, and I was reading about him and the, he was involved in the Bay Area leftist groups, and Judy Berry showed up at one point in one of the three or four people removed. But, and all these groups were sort of involved and mixed up and splintering from each other. And there were, attacks. Like Judy Berry's husband was part of the group that was, involved with this historian. Yeah. And like, apparently he tried to kill her. And, and she did end up, eventually getting killed. And there were theories at the time that she was killed by the FBI, but, nobody really proved anything. But I guess my point is the Bay Area was like a hotbed of that kind of stuff in the late 60s and during the 70s, and then extended into the academia, like what you said, in the 80s and 90s. And it's remarkable that there's any form of resistance left at all.
Yeah, like actual on the ground stuff.
Right.
And that's part of, I think, what like this phase or whatever the hell it is that we're going, that's part of the story as well, is that we need to retain that knowledge and like pass it on and keep people thinking and challenging and asking those questions, because like we're human and part of what we do is like think. We don't have to just be led around and the cattle analogy is really good with context. We're all being herded into a way of being which is very, very, very limited for everyone.
Right.
And that's really what's coming. That's what people need to fear. I think they don't need to dive off into these weird areas of massive population, depopulation, and it's all going to be communism. Like, just have a good look around. Like, I try and look at it really simply. I think they want everybody on UBI, and I think they want to be able to like dictate what job you have, and I think they want to be able to dictate what products you buy. And that's really the grand plan.
Right.
Yeah, and on Tuesday we're going to feature Lynn Taylor, who comes at it from the education aspect, and she's talking about how all these laws and these things are put into place to basically cradle to grave control over your life, and pigeonholing people into a track in their life where they, starting from birth through their death, and like, they're never going to not have any sort of opportunity or autonomy.
any options. You know, I
Yeah,
often
yeah,
talk
you
about
guys have done a video or two around that as well, and lifelong learnings along those lines.
Exactly. Yeah. And
where you funnel people into their trade or into something with, you know, while they're still in the womb. That's not a meritocracy. That's not a democracy.
Absolutely not. And you know, this is where the understanding of, like, we use stakeholder capitalism, venture capitalism, you know, that really aspirational next iteration of capitalism. It is important that people understand that, because if they don't understand what's coming, and because it's here, that's the thing, right? We've already got elements of stakeholder capitalism here. What they're doing is getting rid of everything else, and all you're going to be left with is, all we're going to be left with is this stakeholder stuff, and you don't want that.
Yeah.
No, you
I know.
don't. You don't.
And what I find amazing is and this just kind of occurred to me as we're talking about this, is the, you know, in 2020, in the summer of 2020, it was the Black Lives Matter protests, and it was the, you know, the Antifa versus the Proud Boys kind of, you know, game, you know, the Proud Boy show, you know, and so it was all this sort of leftist kind of stuff that was leading the narrative, right? And BLM people coming out and saying we're trained Marxists, you know, and shit like that. And then, but now they're doing it on the right. Right. So now they're using a right-wing narrative and you know, finding ways to vilify people, you know, following that track. So it's really insidious how this stuff is being played. And we are, I mean, collectively, the world population is being played.
Hard. Played.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And that's the hard thing, I think, for people to believe, is just how much and how far and wide the control here goes.
Right.
But also, like, how simplistically bureaucratic, like, mundane it is as well. Like,
I know.
Well, that's definitely, you know, standard operating procedure in corporate hegemony, right? So it's just very beige, it's very boring, and it's not very exciting. You know, it's, somebody will come up to me and say it's baby eating Luciferian, you know, depopulation, and I'll say, no, it's not. It's just a corporate report.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm so sorry. I know it's not exciting, but
it's just,
it doesn't make you scared. It's just people trying to meet their budgets.
Right.
So we've discovered, you know, we're past the hour, and it's getting late here, and we have an early morning. But I wanted to just say that, you know, it took very little effort for us to discover two things that were going on in Canada, which is, one is that funding for automation is around the corner for the truck drivers. So a lot of this convoy stuff feels like a big distraction for the fact that, you know, truck drivers might be losing their jobs to automation, to AI, you know, autonomous vehicles, self-driving vehicles. Yesterday, a state of emergency was declared. And the state of emergency allows for the arrest and imprisonment of Canadian protesters for up to 1 year in jail and fined up to $100,000. They will be snatching the truckers out of their trucks and suspending their commercial licenses.
That sounds like a little bit of like an extreme reporting on what might be going on. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying.
It's from a blue check on Twitter.
I'm not saying it's not true.
I'm just kidding.
I'm just saying it actually will all be true. Like, it will. It's just, we've got to look at why. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, it's okay. So we've discovered that, you know, there's a possibility for automation of trucks in the future, you know, so all of these people that are concerned about the vaccine mandates, and, you know, they call it a working class revolution, you know, that doesn't, I know, right? That doesn't want the vaccine mandate.
It feels like velvet. It's so smooth.
Right. Well, so we did the slightest bit of, you know, we have opposable thumbs, right? So we did the slightest.
Oh, and I know how to type too.
Right.
A little bit of digging.
The slightest bit of digging and research to discover that, you know, all of these logistics and shipping companies have already been automated, and the whole target is Canada, right? So there's that. And then of course, it took very little effort to discover about the lipid nanoparticle technology, which makes the mRNA COVID shot. I don't want to call
it work.
It makes it work. Canada holds the entire world hostage with the mRNA technology because they own the rights to that lipid nanoparticle. So that means that they have billions of dollars to gain by unleashing the mRNA technology in any form of vaccine, not just through the COVID shots, but any vaccine in the future. And they want all of the money, unfortunately, like I mentioned at the beginning of this, based on corporate law, that's fraud. You can't just go and make these kinds of, monopolizing corporate business.
And not share it around.
You can't do that.
Sort of thing that sends things to war. Yeah.
And that's why, Trudeau is in hiding, because he's probably lawyering up because there are courts in place right now that are like, you can't do this.
Well, so what we were saying this morning in our and I think it was midnight your time when we were talking, but or close to it. We were saying that basically there are courts on both sides of the border in the United States and in Canada that were looking into how to, or what they, setting up the legal framework to arrest and detain Trudeau.
Right.
But what happened is and so the truck convoy seems to be like the perfect tool to like hang just about anything you want to do as a counter-revolution, right? But in this case, a distraction, and they ended up distracting the courts, those some of the same courts, to rule on whether these people can protest or not. Something that they actually have a right to do, but now the state is setting the rules for that and saying, well, now you're going to have to rule on, the rules that we've set. Are these people guilty of sedition, or are they just protesting?
Right. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so I guess what I'm trying to say is we've discovered this with Canada. Chances are we'll discover something very similar when the convoy industrial complex comes to the United States. Mm-hmm. What about what's going on in Australia is there anything specifically in the works for Australian truck drivers? Is there automation? Because I don't know.
I'm going to have to, I don't know. I
don't know.
Yeah. I'm going to have to look into it a bit more, but it's interesting what you say about the tech that Canada owns there, because I know that Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, CSL, just down the road from where I live here, actually, have got their hands on some of the tech. I don't know which part owner it is. And they have been operating flat out for 12 months down there.
Oh, man.
All sorts of biotech goodies for us all. So I'll have to look into it a little bit more, because that's definitely that's going to tie in with what you're talking about there.
Okay.
Especially with Canada and Australia both being Commonwealth countries.
Right.
There's going to be a link there, I'll guarantee it. So thanks for pointing that out. I'll sniff around that a bit more too.
Yeah.
And
well, and then we also found out that, Mr. Tesla, what's his name? Elon Musk is like supporting the Canadian truck convoys. And we're like, okay, what's a tech billionaire? What is he doing? Well,
good guy, Elon.
we saw a post somewhere that we mentioned, a couple of weeks ago, where it was like this kind of thing, if it goes through, he's supporting this because it's the kind of thing that can turn him from being a billionaire to a trillionaire.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he is bought in. One of the articles that I saw, and it was not a new article. It was from like 2017, 2018. And they were testing Tesla trucks that could be easily fitted with autonomous technology.
Yeah.
Right. And he also runs a company that, does, you know, mind
brain computer interface.
Right, brain computer
Oh,
interface.
yeah, right.
So that's easily converted into like an AI control system,
Totally.
right? So
Yeah.
I mean, all this technology can be easily used in different formats in different ways, and you know, they've been working on this for a long time, and now, you know, it's gonna,
So-
like COVID, it's gonna like catch everybody by surprise.
Right.
Yeah,
Possibly. I'd like to remind people too that when you're dealing with funding, and when you're dealing with like any kind
Oh,
of
well, that's a good point. Yeah, go on.
any kind
Yeah.
of new any kind of new innovation, so you can market the innovation and you can say, look at this, you know, wonderful innovation. Isn't it amazing? Look at this wonderful innovation. It's green, it's rectangle. Look at this innovation. And you show one product and you get billions of dollars for your product. And then you just kind of never actually see the product. So even if we don't see our supply chain automated, it doesn't matter. They're still going to funnel the money into the idea of it.
Right.
And that's unfortunately, we saw all of that with unicorn companies in San Francisco in the early 2000s with the .com boom.
Well, and then in the 2010s.
And
too.
in the 2010s, and we were wondering how the hell these people who basically weren't offering anything of use to the planet were getting funded to the tunes of millions of dollars. 25-year-olds were retiring and moving to Fiji. You know, it's like, how is this possible? Like, what is going on? Like, you know, so that I think too is a big part of it. And wherever the money comes from, they're still going to tell the working class, we don't need you anymore because, you know, budget cuts or automation or whatever. So whether that happens or not, they're still going to lose their jobs.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Right.
So-
Yeah, for sure. And you know, to your point about the investment, it's like a friend of ours was talking on the chat that we were, you know, sharing, all of us, and she pointed out like an old AT&T ad of like the video phone, and it's the same kind of thing. It's like they put that out there not to say that this is what's coming in the future, but to get the investment into their technology.
Right.
So
it's a
this
big
has
marketing.
been going on. This has been going on for a long time.
Yeah. So a lot of what we're witnessing is a big marketing campaign under the guise of a health need, a health crisis, or under the guise of, you know, vaccine mandates or something like that. My biggest concern, though, I think is the same as yours. The reframing and the rewording of domestic terrorism laws, the redefining of domestic terrorism laws. So it's like that's my biggest concern, is that innocent people that are swept up into this might find themselves suddenly, you know, in court. You know?
Yeah, and that's it. That's my concern. Yeah, is that like parents are going to have their kids taken away from them.
Right.
That's where we're at. And if they don't have them taken away from them, then they're going to have.
They're going to have to sign up for services.
Yeah, an authority up there.
It's very much a mob mentality. It'd be a shame if you had your kid taken away. You better go and sign up for these programs, which I'll benefit from. You know.
Right.
So.
Well, and then, you know, the use of the white supremacist language, which has been going on for, you know, a few years and for a long time, but, you know, the last few years, it's really been amped up. And I feel like it's being used, especially now in these truck convoy movements, that they are going to start directing. I mean, they already start directing that at those people that are involved. And that will be that wedge that will allow them to, you know, use that, like the things that you guys have been just talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's spot on. Yeah, I agree with all that.
Yeah. I want to just thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us. We consider you a friend, and we have, you know, just so that our audience knows, you know, we talk to Alex all the time. So it was really great that he came and
we had you on last year, and along with Grace, and some of your kids popped in too.
Yeah.
As I said before, I had to get the grandparents around to give assistance with the kids this time. I was going berserk before I jumped on.
Yeah. Well, next time they can pop on and say hi and see themselves on camera, which I know they like.
Yeah.
They're so adorable. Oh my goodness. They're just so cute.
And look, thanks for saying that. And thank you for, you know, giving me the opportunity to come on here and like blurt it all out. As I said to Grace the other day, at least it gives gives me a chance to say, look, it's in one place here. Go and ask me about this part. Go and ask me about that part. But trying to just explain it to one person in one go, it's near on impossible. So
Right.
I really appreciate that you've at least opened up the discussion around, what the signals are really telling us here.
Yeah.
With the view to keeping people safe and keeping their action coherent, rather than just spinning off into really dangerous areas for themselves and those around them. So
I agree. Yeah, well, what we find is that and we're going to start bringing more, what Julie calls, regular people who are discovering things out there, who are not, celebrities or semi-celebrities or whatever. But what we discover is as we talk in these contexts online and, doing our little audios and doing our Bookmark and other shows, we are able to work out these ideas, as we speak them. And I have a feeling that also, I got a few ideas while we were just talking, right? And started making connections.
The number of times I've been writing something out to somebody in the past, maybe 6 months, and it actually generates itself while I'm writing it.
Right.
So I think that's kind of what you're saying as well.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're at, is that we need to be clear about what we're communicating to one another and make sure we're taking the right opportunities, not the wrong opportunities.
Right. We need to talk to each other. We don't need to criticize each other for our ideas.
Right.
We may disagree with them, but we don't have to vilify people over those ideas. And that's what I found. That's what I've been finding very disheartening lately.
Yeah. It's really sad to be accused of whatever the hell it is that we're accused of on a daily basis on this platform.
I'm getting cop and spy at the moment. Cop, spy, and commie are the most common ones I get at the moment. So
really, oh my god,
none of those things. So.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. I don't identify as any of those things.
Well, identity and identifying as is the most important part these days.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyway.
All right. Well, we're going to let you enjoy your Sunday.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the chat, guys.
Yeah.
Yes,
thank you.
Our pleasure.
Right.
Should we put him in the green room?
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you in a bit.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with you.
All right. All right. Wow.
Well, thank you for joining us, guys. I hope you really enjoyed that conversation with our friend Alex.
I really did.
I did too.
I thought that this was one of our better shows, in fact.
It was really fun.
There was a lot of content that Alex was throwing at us, and we were kind of sifting through it, and he apologized because he's like, I don't know, I don't have this in any sort of coherent way, but I think we were able to parse it through and really come up with something. So I really like
I think it's important that we keep the dialogue open, and we keep ourselves open to the fact that not everything that we're fed, whether it's a health scare or a protest, that we just keep a critical eye on, what's behind the scenes, follow the money. You guys did a really good job following the money and following the technology during the whole COVID eruption, the marketing campaign around the COVID idea.
We even got shit for that.
So let's do the same for other things, because this is your new normal. It is the constant cause du jour industrial complex. It's never going to stop.
It's never going to stop.
It's not a convoy, it'll be something else.
Yeah, if it's not BLM and the Antifa Proud Boy show.
And this is something that we talked about at the very beginning of the national emergency, when here in the United States the national emergency was declared on March 13th of 2020. We said, fasten your seatbelts, because it's going to be the constant a constant stream of trauma and anxiety that will keep you looped into manipulations by the state.
Yeah.
So.
And the New York Times in their email, their morning email yesterday, started talking about risky, not risky behavior, but risky, in regard to people's health. And they were saying things like, if you're a woman who's of childbearing age, and you're not on birth control, you shouldn't be drinking alcohol. I mean, this is something that the CDC said, apparently, and the New York Times is repeating it.
Not on birth control.
Well, basically, 15 to 50.
Okay.
So,
or 15 to 35 at least.
And that's apparently risky behavior. So, this is going to be the next thing that's going to be coming at us,
Right.
and
at
that,
The
and
Handmaid's
along
Tale.
with along with the green thing. So, there's a lot of things that are going to be coming at us, and expect those to be taking place, so our behavior is part of what they're going to be, looking to change. And this has been going on since at least the 17th century. So, fasten your seatbelts. We're getting into like some serious rough territory here.
Yeah. So just keep your wits about you.
Yeah.
And don't let yourself be emotionally manipulated
Yeah.
by the
The powers that be.
powers that be.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
All right.
Thanks a lot. We're
All
going to
right.
go now. It's quite late here. So
So-
we're going to sign off, and we will see you Tuesday when we have a conversation with our good friend Lynn regarding some of the
Education issues that are going on.
education issues.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Have
All
a
right.
good one.
All right. Bye-bye. See you
Bye.
next time. Book of Hours are artists here to empower and embolden your response to the constant negative sound bites that attack your news and social media feeds. In order to continue making the video essays and art you've come to enjoy, we need your support. Make a one-time donation or become a patron. Thank you.